Comedy episode 768 of the podcast that is Swimming America, the Outdoor Sports Podcast. It is Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. People, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is having a great day. And let me tell you this, midweek show, we got so much to get to before we even preview the weekend ahead, and we got a great weekend ahead. Today's show, though, we're focusing on the present. We are going to look at three big stories from the last couple days. The first, Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. You tell me you can't stand Colorado. You tell me you hate him. You tell me you're tired of the coverage. Did you see the TV rating from Saturday night? It is clear that you guys are watching Deion Sanders and Colorado, whether you admit it or not. From there, we'll take a quick break. We got to talk Alabama. Jalen Milroe back as the starting quarterback, but there are all sorts of whispers of what's going on at Bama. Has there been a locker room revolt? Is there something else going on? Was Jalen Milroe actually suspended last week? We have to break that all down. And then finally, we will wrap with the latest on Mel Tucker. By now, you know he got fired, but he is fighting back. He is coming to Michigan State. Does he have a case against Michigan State? And then, oh, by the way, who could be the next head coach at Michigan State, which in my opinion is just as interesting of a question. So loaded show. Should mention, by the way, and do something a little bit different on Thursday. We have such a crazy week in college football this coming weekend. Oregon, Colorado, Clemson, Florida State, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Auburn. We're going, oh, by the way, Ohio State, Notre Dame. We're going to put the college football betting show on our normal Aaron Torres pod feed. That way you don't have to wait till Friday to preview the weekend ahead. So that is what we're going to do this week. Normal show today. We'll do the preview show on Thursday, an hour of breaking down college football. And then Friday, we will react to whatever we need to heading into the weekend. So busy show, busy week, fun show. These are the moments that we live for. In June, July, and August, when there's nothing to talk about, we live for these moments. So with that said, let's not waste any more time, and let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, I know I've said it a million times. The intention is not to talk Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, and Colorado every single episode, but something always seems to be happening with this program. In the lead up to the season, it was the roster. Could all these transfers work? How good was Shedeur Sanders? Which, by the way, I said from the beginning, he's going to be awesome. Anyway, what could it work? Then it was, could they beat TCU? Then they beat TCU. Then Coach Prime brought his receipts. Then it was, can they beat Nebraska? Then they beat Nebraska. Then it was, could they beat Colorado? Then it was Jay Norvell. Then it was Sunglass. You go on and on down the list. Every single day, there is something to talk about with Coach Prime. And it's funny because the more that I talk about it, two things happen. One, you guys and girls tune in. Everybody seems to be interested, but I also hear nonstop, Torres, you're talking too much, Coach Prime. We don't care. We're not interested. We got to move on. Well, a funny thing came out on Tuesday morning that basically confirms everything that I've said and all the reasons that we continue to talk Coach Prime, Colorado on this show. It is because even if you guys and girls tell me you're tired of Coach Prime, you're sick of it, you don't want to hear about it anymore, well, the numbers say the exact opposite as you guys are tuning in at record numbers to watch the Colorado Buffaloes play football on Saturdays. That's not just my opinion, but it is fact, as since we last recorded on Monday's show, we got two very interesting pieces of information about Colorado football. And again, just how much you guys and girls care, even if you say you don't. What are those pieces of news? Well, on Tuesday, we got the TV rating for the Colorado State game on Saturday. And to be clear, on Monday, you started to see rumors. We'll get the official number on Tuesday, but it's going to be really big. And I sat there and said, okay, well, like what is a really big number for Colorado State, right? Because remember, this was a 10 p.m. local time kickoff. This was Colorado State versus Colorado. We're talking a group of 5 team versus Colorado, which was up until 6 months ago, or really a year ago when Coach Prime got the job in December, the worst team in the Pac-12. If I had tried to talk Colorado State on this show a year ago, You guys, I would have been fired from my own show, and it's got my name on it, and I own it. You guys wouldn't have listened. I don't think Colorado State was like one of the top 500 games that anybody cared about last year. I bring it up to say, oh, you guys and girls cared on Saturday. Why is that? We got the TV rating, and how about this? 9.83 million people watched Colorado State, Colorado. 9.83 million people tune into a 10 o'clock Eastern time game featuring Colorado State and Colorado, two schools that you could not have cared less about a year ago. And so what it speaks to me is, you tell me you hate Coach Prime, but you tune in. First of all, let me give some context on this number and just how absurd it is. First of all, as crazy as the 9.83 is, it's actually even crazier when you break it all down. The number actually peaked. First of all, 9.83 was the viewership, but the number actually peaked at around 11 million viewers a little bit after 11 p.m., which is insane in and of itself. And this was the stat that threw me for a loop. John Oren, who covers TV ratings and stuff, sports TV media, I think it's for the Washington Post or something, I don't know, but I saw him put out this stat. He said that over 8 million people were still watching Colorado State at 2:15 Eastern time when that game went to overtime. That is insanity. And think about it from this perspective. One, if you take out Colorado State, the second highest rated game on Saturday, you know what it was? It was Georgia, South Carolina. CBS, channel that everybody gets, channel that, you could put the little wire into your TV and you can find it, featuring the reigning national champs and number one team in the country. Did about 5.63 million. So about 40% less than Colorado did at 10 p.m. Eastern time. On top of that, I thought this part was actually more interesting. Tennessee, Florida was the game before Colorado State, Colorado, okay? Tennessee, Florida, two huge national brands, two teams that have won national championships in the last 25 years. Two SEC schools, huge fan bases, state schools, did about 5.2 million viewers, which is by no means a bad number. But just think about it like this. What that means to me, 5.2 for Tennessee, Florida, 9.83 for Colorado. It means that if every single person who was watching Florida, Tennessee left their TVs on for Colorado State, Colorado, none of them went to bed. None of them left the house. None of them had their wives or girlfriends or husbands, whatever, make them change the channel. That means that there were still an additional 4.5 million people who'd flipped the TV on at 10 p.m. Eastern time just to watch Colorado State. So it is unbelievable to me, and it speaks to something that I truly believe. Coach Prime has created, I think, maybe the single biggest regular season sports story a college sports story that I can ever remember. That sounds crazy. It sounds like hyperbole. But when you have 9.5, almost 10 million people tuning into a game at 10 o'clock at night, I don't know how else to take it. Now, why I think that, a couple things. One, Coach Prime, he is what every great sports story is. He is, you tune in because you love him or you tune in because you hate him. Now, you guys and girls know where I stand. I actually like it. I think he's great for college football. I think, listen, there's a lot of bluster and whatever, but he's about kids. He's about the right things. He wants to help out, and he's doing it his own way. I have loved this story from the beginning. But at the same time, this is what all great sports stories are. Whether it's Michael Jordan's Bulls, Shaq and Kobe on the Lakers, Coach K at Duke, the USC football teams under Pete Carroll, Alabama and Nick Saban prior to this year. You tune in because you love it, or you tune in because you want to see them lose. Belichick and Brady's New England Patriots. You tuned in to watch them win. You also tune in because, darn it, you wanted to see them lose. And so it sounds like hyperbole to say that this is the biggest college sports story I can ever remember, but I don't think it is. One, the TV ratings speak for themselves. I just told you. I am telling you right now, 9.83 million is insane. By the way, this is on the heels of 2 weeks ago when they played Nebraska in a big noon kickoff game that was the highest rated Pac-12 game, if I remember correctly. I think it was the highest rated Pac-12 game in the history of the Pac-12, I think ever. I think it was the highest rated Pac-12 game in the history of, since Fox has been broadcasting Pac-12 games. So that is indisputable. The numbers don't lie. On top of that, the interest is just insane. And again, I know you guys and girls tell me you don't care, but I can say this, working in the media, this podcast is my own. It's the Aaron Torres podcast. I can talk about whatever I want. I could come on here and talk about hockey if I wanted. Now, I don't know anything about hockey and I don't care, but I can talk about whatever I want. But what I can tell you is all these TV networks, all of these radio stations, they tune in to what you guys and girls want to hear. So it is jarring to me when I was working out on Monday morning in Undisputed after an NFL Sunday, after the Cowboys beat the Jets and after whatever, the Patriots lost in primetime. Undisputed led their show with Colorado State. And they were justified, by the way. First Take is into it. I work for Fox Sports Radio. I love all my guys and girls at Fox Sports Radio, okay? But we kind of have an understanding. In NFL season, you talk NFL, maybe a little bit of college football here or there. The fact is, my colleagues at Fox Sports Radio, I see them talking Colorado. I see them talking Coach Prime because people care. And here's the crazy part. I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon. Now, I know the anti-Coach Prime people are going to sit there and say, well, what happens if they lose to Oregon? Well, first of all, the interest is going to be through the roof. I think it's very interesting. Remember, Florida State Clemson this weekend is being played at noon Eastern. Florida State Clemson. I mean, for a child of the 90s like me, Florida State was bigger than life itself. Florida State Clemson is a noon Eastern kickoff because ESPN and ABC wanted Colorado, Oregon in the prime slot at 3:30 Eastern. Now, some would say, why wouldn't they put it at 7:30 Eastern, 8 o'clock Eastern? Well, the argument is because Notre Dame is playing Ohio State at 7:30 Eastern on NBC. Those are maybe the two biggest brands nationally in college football. And I think when ESPN scheduled this game, they probably didn't want to go head-to-head with it. Now, I think they probably regret it. I think they probably think that if they put this game head-to-head with Notre Dame, Ohio State, it would do a similar number, if not outrate it. And I don't think they have to be afraid to put Colorado in the 7:30 Eastern or 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific window anymore. That was a dead time. We were told for years, nobody's going to tune in that late. Well, if the product's good enough, people will watch. And so I don't think it's slowing down. It is worth noting, by the way, I didn't even mention this. Big Noon Kickoff has announced that the following week, September 30th, week 5, USC goes to Colorado. Caleb Williams versus Shedeur Sanders. Fox could have picked any game that weekend for their Big Noon Kickoff. All those Big Ten teams, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, they chose USC at Colorado, and they're playing it at 12 Eastern, noon Eastern, 10 a.m. local time. So we have a Pac-12 game kicking off at 10 a.m. local time because Fox knows people will tune in. And so I don't think it's slowing down. I understand, look, people are going to say if Colorado loses this weekend, what happens then? People are going to still tune in to see, do they bounce back against Caleb Williams? Do they not bounce back? If they lose then, what happens the following week? And by the way, if you think it's slowing down, think again. At some point, we're going to just talk about what Coach Prime is already starting to do in recruiting. The recruiting is going to be crazy to talk about. The portal is again going to be crazy to talk about. You guys think one loss, we're going to stop talking about Coach Prime? I don't buy it. But again, I'm just here to tell you this story is so big and so much bigger than even I realized. And I've been following Coach Prime dating back to the Jackson State days. This is unbelievable. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. And when we come back, how about some controversy in Tuscaloosa? Jalen Milroe back as the starting quarterback at Alabama. And there are all sorts of whispers that maybe, just maybe, there's something more to this story than meets the eye. We'll take a quick break, come back, discuss that all next. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. I do want to switch gears, and I want to hit on, I guess, what you would call the other biggest story in college football. So it's interesting, right? Because earlier in the show, we obviously talked Deion Sanders, Colorado. And that is the biggest story in college football. But it feels like every time we're ready to move on from Coach Prime, something else happens where we have to talk about him again. Why do I bring it up? Well, it's because that's kind of the same thing with the Alabama quarterback situation. Every time we're ready to move on, something else happens, and something new happened earlier this week since we last recorded Monday's show. I will say this for Colorado. At least Colorado, by the way, is fun. Alabama's quarterback situation is just depressing. But here's a quick reminder of everything that has happened with Alabama's quarterback situation so far to date. One, we had a crazy quarterback battle in the fall camp. 3 guys enter. Nick Saban at a press conference actually publicly said, like, I need one of these guys to go win this thing because all of them are waiting for me to hand them the job. That was probably red flag number 1 that things weren't going well, but Jalen Milroe is ultimately named the starter and starts week 1 against Middle Tennessee State. To his credit, he looks pretty good. Maybe Middle Tennessee's bad. We don't really know. We go into week 2 against Texas and we get clarification. Jalen Milroe doesn't feel like the answer. Really good runner, really good on the deep ball, not great in between. And Alabama ends up losing to Texas 34-24. Well, a week ago, we find out that Jalen Milroe is ultimately going to be benched and that Alabama is going to give Tyler Buchner, the Notre Dame transfer, a shot at the job. Well, Tyler Buchner got a grand total of 14 passes before he was ultimately benched by Nick Saban. But the crazy part was Tyler Buchner was not replaced by Jalen Milroe, but instead replaced by the 3rd stringer, Ty Simpson. Did you get all that? Well, okay, good, because here's the update since Monday, as after the South Florida game, Alabama did win 17-3. Jalen Milroe has now been renamed the starting quarterback at Alabama. So keep in mind, got benched last week. Then the guy who replaced him also got benched. And then they did not go to Jalen Milroe, but instead to somebody else. Yet after the game, Nick Saban said that Jalen Milroe has done enough and he is going to be the starter. And so it's been really interesting since Jalen Milroe was officially named the starter again on Monday, because we've gotten all sorts of conspiracy theories out of Tuscaloosa. Was Jalen Milroe benched? Was there somehow some sort of revolt in the Alabama locker room when he got benched? And that is why everybody was so upset and why Alabama played so poorly. So what I want to do is tell you why I actually think Alabama went back to Jalen Milroe, why Nick Saban made the decision. But before we do, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a little myth busting with Torres. We're going to do a little X-Files conspiracy theory with Torres, because what I want to go ahead and do is shoot down all the reasons why I think some of these conspiracy theories on what's really going on behind the scenes are mostly tomfoolery, okay? By the way, tried to do this segment with the X-Files music underneath. It did not go well. Maybe we get to it next time. I'll give you a little do 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 do. You get the point. Let's go to conspiracy theory number 1 on what's really going on at Alabama. Conspiracy theory number 1 is that Jalen Milroe was actually suspended last week. That is why he did not play. I don't buy it one bit. And the reason I don't buy it is because anybody who covers Alabama, anybody who was around Alabama at all, says that Jalen Milroe is literally one of the nicest kids on the planet. As a matter of fact, that's a lot of the argument of why he won the job in the first place and why there would have been a revolt if he did not play. It's because everybody loves him. Nick Saban loves him. The staff loves him. The locker room loves him. The support staff loves him. The media who covers this team can't stop raving about him. And so I'm not saying it couldn't have happened, but it would run completely counter to everything we know about him as a kid. 2, let me ask you a question. When somebody does something dumb off the field, when has Nick Saban ever covered his butt? Think about a few years ago. Remember Jaleel Billingsley? Remember that name? He was a kid, really talented tight end. In that locker room, he caused trouble. And Nick Saban called him out in the press. Like, do you want to be great or not? Kid ended up transferring. I don't even know where he is. He transferred to Texas. I don't know if he ended up staying there or not. I didn't look it up. By the way, remember last spring, Tony Mitchell, freshman, gets arrested, speeding and gun. Remember Nick Saban suspends him? Remember Nick Saban says there is no wrong place, wrong time? So like the idea that Nick Saban is somehow covering for this kid, I just don't buy it. 2, here's the other thought that could have potentially happened on Saturday. Again, conspiracy theory, Conspiracy theory is that the whole locker room loves Jalen Milroe, which I believe, and that when he was benched, there was essentially a revolt, and that team did not try hard because they did not want a quarterback to succeed. Respectfully, I've heard other people say it. I don't criticize others' opinions. I don't want to call any individual, I don't want to call any individual a name because I'm not here to criticize other people that have opinions. I have many of my own. That just makes zero sense to me. Let me explain why. First of all, if there was a team-wide conspiracy theory to get Jalen Milroe back into the starting lineup as a starting quarterback, the team did a very bad job, okay? And here's why. The defense held South Florida to 3 points. The defense was lights out. The defense was fantastic on Saturday against South Florida. Now, admittedly, it's South Florida. They stink. But if the whole locker room was in on this, the defense did a really bad job. You know who else did a really bad job? If this is a coup to get Jalen Milroe the starting job back, how about Roydell Williams, the running back who went for over 100 yards and basically put the team on his back late to seal the win? So, was there a team-wide coup? If so, it was a terrible coup. Maybe it was just the O-line. But even then, that doesn't make sense from this reason. Let's say that the O-line really said, screw it, we're not going to try because we want our guy at quarterback. Well, you're not just screwing Tyler Buchner, and you're not just screwing Ty Simpson. By the way, X-Files music, do, 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 do. You're not just screwing the two quarterbacks. You know who else you're screwing? The running backs in the backfield. Roydell Williams, you think he's happy having 6, 7, 8 guys tackling him every time he touches the football, going at him full speed? Doesn't make sense. You know who else would probably be pissed? All those wide receivers who are probably trying to put up stats and get to the NFL. You think they're going to sacrifice a week of game film on principle to get Jalen Milroe as a starting quarterback? Doesn't make sense. And then 3, let me ask a simple question. If there was a coup, if it was about getting Jalen Milroe a starting job, and if the O-line purposely stunk to get Jalen Milroe back, well, what about the week before when Jalen Milroe was the starting quarterback and they couldn't block anybody against Texas? Because I remember the Texas game. Alabama ran for about 3 yards per carry. If you take Jalen Milroe's rushing yards out, it was a lot fewer than that. Things were so bad, Nick Saban was literally asking people on his call-in show, shout out Pee-wee, what he had to do to get the O-line fixed. So I don't buy some crazy conspiracy theory that it's a team-wide coup. What I believe happened this week and why I believe Jalen Milroe is now the starting quarterback is a few things. One, I do believe that a week ago out of Texas, Nick Saban did not know if Jalen Milroe was the best answer for his team at quarterback. I do believe that. I think he wanted to see Tyler Buchner. I think when he realized that Tyler Buchner definitely isn't the guy, and he probably knew that going in, he sees this guy at fall camp. He then wanted to see Ty Simpson in game action. And I think Ty Simpson played actually pretty well. But even in that game action, he realized, you know what, we're going to find a way to win this thing. But if we want to win games going forward, we can't do it with either of those guys. And what I really believe Nick Saban realized is this. He realized the same thing that we have all realized. He realized that the offensive line stinks. By the way, conspiracy theory number 3. I heard this as well, that Nick Saban was purposely putting Tyler Buchner and Ty Simpson out there to prove that those guys were not capable. I don't buy that because, again, if that was the case, then the O-line did a bad job, unless the O-line is now conspiring with Nick Saban. What I believe Nick Saban is saying with this Jalen Milroe switch to quarterback, this is what I truly believe is happening. I think he realizes a couple things. He realizes, forget the quarterback position for half a second. He is basically answering the question that I posed on Monday's Aaron Torres pod. I said, everybody wants the quarterback answer, the O-line answer. What if there is no answer? And I think Nick Saban is slowly starting to realize there's no great answer on this roster. The O-line is not good and certainly can't pass block. The quarterbacks are probably not capable. And so what's the old saying? You got to make chicken soup or chicken salad out of chicken, you know what? I think that's essentially what Nick Saban is doing right now. What he realizes is a couple things. My O-line can't pass protect. So Tyler Buchner, you're out because you can't make enough plays with your feet. Ty Simpson, probably not the right guy. We can run block, but more importantly, we play really good defense. And that's the thing that I think has been totally lost over the last couple of weeks with this Alabama team. I keep hearing, oh, it's last year all over again. No. The defense was bad last year. Did you see the defense against Hendon Hooker? Did you see the defense against Jaden Daniels? Did you see the defense against Quinn Ewers when he was hurt, before he got hurt, excuse me? That defense was bad. This defense is actually really, really, really good. Everyone wants to talk about the Texas game, 34 points. As I've said many times, Alabama had the lead going into the fourth quarter against Texas. That defense gave up 13 points through 3 quarters against the Longhorns. And so I think what Nick Saban is realizing is this. The plan I had going in, again, I'll use another analogy. The Mike Tyson line, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Well, Nick Saban had a plan, and then he got punched in the mouth. And his plan of we're going to play complementary football, we're going to run the ball, we're going to throw the ball, we're going to play defense, it's not working. I think what he realizes is this. We have to play great defense every week. To win, we're going to have to play great defense. The good news, we're not facing a quarterback better than Quinn Ewers all year. Sorry, Will Rogers, who Mississippi State doesn't even let throw the ball. Sorry, Jackson Dart. Sorry, whoever. You're not playing a better quarterback than Quinn Ewers. So what we need to do is play great defense. With these new clock rules, we need to run the ball more than we thought. And that is the one thing that Jalen Milroe can do. And so over the next couple of weeks, I expect Alabama football to play ugly, ugly, ugly football. But the goal is not to win with style. It's not to win as if Mac Jones is your quarterback and Steve Sarkisian is calling plays, or Tua is your quarterback and whoever is calling plays, Lane Kiffin. It is, can we win? Can we just find a way to win? And the way to win is to chew up the clock and rely heavily on our defense. By the way, we're seeing other coaches with these new clock rules do the same. Billy Napier literally said in his Monday press conference last week, we have to keep Tennessee off the field. And if you go back to that Florida-Tennessee game, I forget the stat, but they threw the ball like 3 times in the second half. They got the lead, chewed up the clock, found a way to win no matter how ugly it was. And I think Alabama's kind of doing the same. I think Nick Saban looks at this Ole Miss game and says, we're at home. If we don't turn the ball over, Ole Miss has some questions. First of all, Pete Golding coaches that defense. So that's one. Pete Golding, the former Alabama offensive coordinator. But 2, the Ole Miss offense is putting up big stats. But if you look at their games, they're all close until the fourth quarter. Then Ole Miss kind of runs away from teams. But I think it was 17-17 going into the fourth quarter against Tulane. Last week, it was like 17-3 against Georgia Tech. And I think that's what Nick Saban's trying to do. Can we survive Ole Miss? Can we survive Mississippi State, who's terrible, in a week from now? And if we can we start to build momentum? Can we start to build confidence with that O-line? Can we start to build it at the quarterback position? Maybe it happens this year, maybe it doesn't. But Nick Saban knows he has no other option. Now, the good news is I don't believe this means the dynasty is over. I don't believe it means the dynasty is dead. I don't believe it means Nick Saban is retiring. They have the number 1 quarterback in America committed for 2024, Julian Sand. We know that Nick Saban will not make the same mistake in the transfer portal twice. But what this says to me is Nick Saban is going to do what he has done great throughout his career. He's going to play to his team's strengths. And more importantly, he's going to play to the rules. Remember, a decade ago, he complained about the speed and tempo of college football. What does he do? Hires Lane Kiffin, recruits Tua, changes everything. Now, I think it's the opposite. He sees those new rules. He knows the personnel he has, and he says, we're going to have to win a lot of 20-16, 14-10 type games and just try to survive this year and get to next year. Will it work? I don't know. But in my opinion, that's what happened on Saturday. That's what happened this week. That is why Jalen Milroe is the starting quarterback, and it will be fascinating to watch this all going forward. Going to take a quick break, come back. We'll wrap with some Mel Tucker stuff. By the way, just a quick reminder, we'll preview all these big games. We're going to do a bonus Thursday episode, mega preview show. So we'll have plenty on Ole Miss, Alabama as well. But we're going to come back, and we're going to wrap with Mel Tucker. Quick break. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. And I do want to go and wrap with a little bit of a serious topic, but also an update on a topic that we talked about quite a bit last week here on the Torres pod. And that is the status of Mel Tucker, the now former head coach of Michigan State. As a quick reminder, before we get into the segment, obviously we're going to be talking about serious stuff. And I always try to say this. I always try to be respectful of you guys and girls as an audience, as listeners, understanding that you're sometimes listening with family, friends, children, whatever. Just be cognizant of who you're listening with because, again, some serious topics going forward. With that said, I think everybody kind of knows the backstory on Mel Tucker. Not going to spend a ton of time on it. But essentially, Mel Tucker, head coach, Michigan State, hires a woman named Brenda Tracy to come speak to her team. Brenda Tracy, this is where it gets serious. She is a sexual assault survivor. And she comes to campuses now to speak to students and especially football teams about the severity of sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, physical abuse, basically just have a baseline respect for women. And so I bring it up because 2 Saturdays ago, we see a report late at night that Mel Tucker is being accused or being investigated, I really should say, for sexual harassment. We later find out that it involves Brenda Tracy. And then over the next couple of days, we find out that basically it's a he said, she said, unfortunate, serious stuff about a relationship between the two of them. Brenda Tracy basically said that, that he made unwanted advances on her, invited her to hotels, did some stuff while they were on the phone. Mel Tucker said it was a completely 100% consensual relationship between the two. But Michigan State suspended Mel Tucker. And here is where the update is. Mel Tucker on Monday was officially told, guess what? We are going to fire you. We being Michigan State. Michigan State will fire him, and they intend to fire him with cause, meaning that they do not plan to pay any of his money. So that's where things were as of Monday night. But there was an update on Tuesday that is worth discussing here on Wednesday's Aaron Torres pod, and that is that Mel Tucker has spoken out. He is not going down without a fight. He is not going down without getting his side of the story out. He is going to fight for his money, and he is also going to fight for his reputation. Here is some of what Mel Tucker had to say to ESPN about this entire situation going forward. He said, let's be clear. I don't believe MSU plans to fire me because I admitted to an entirely consensual private relationship with another adult who gave one presentation at Michigan State at my behest over 2 years ago. He continued, Michigan State knew about the information on which it supposedly relies to end my contract since at least March of 2023. Yet only after Ms. Tracy and potentially others leaked the confidential investigation report to the press did Michigan State suddenly decide this same information warrants termination. About 1 week later, with no new information, MSU has moved to terminate me sanctimoniously and illogically, claiming this action has no impact on the ongoing investigation. The investigation is designed to determine if I violated policy. I did not, but regardless, basic fairness requires that process play out before any sanctions are determined. And so this is Mel Tucker. And again, I don't, one thing we can agree, disagree, and he has his side, she has her side. I don't blame him at all for fighting for his money. And I don't blame him at all for fighting for his reputation, because clearly in his early 50s, he wants to coach again. With that said, I don't think it will matter all that much. And I don't think he should expect to get very much of his money. So let's explain why. First off, listen, whether it's my opinion or not, I think we can all agree that even if it is a consensual relationship, even if both parties agree, this was really, really, really dumb on Mel Tucker's part, okay? And so outside of the fact that he's fighting for his reputation, he's fighting for his money, which he should, this is just so stupid on Mel Tucker's part. And to be clear, and I always say this, but I want to make sure everyone understands, I am not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I am not a perfect husband. I'm not a perfect son. I'm not a perfect brother. I'm not a perfect friend. I am not perfect. But when you are the highest paid employee at a state university, you are married by law. Now, Mel Tucker claims that they are separated, I guess would be the right word. It does not matter. You should not be behaving like this. You should not be having what is still by law an extramarital affair. But here's the other thing. You certainly should not be doing it with a woman who was literally hired by the university to come to speak to your team about respect for women, about relationships, about the things that she was hired to do. By the way, that's not just my opinion. That is Michigan State's stance on this. As part of Mel Tucker's letter that he got that he was basically being fired, here is what he said. Here is what Michigan State said. The unprofessional and unethical behavior is particularly egregious given that the vendor at issue was contracted by the university for the sole purpose of educating student athletes on and preventing instances of inappropriate sexual misconduct. That was in the letter sent by the AD, who was friends with Mel Tucker, by the way. That has nothing to do with it. But the AD has always had Mel Tucker's back. And so for him to say that, it means that Mel Tucker screwed up bad. I'm not a perfect husband. I'm not a perfect son. I'm not a perfect brother. But you have to know, if you are the highest paid state employee at the university, If you are the face of the university along with Tom Izzo, you cannot be doing stuff like this, especially if considering who the woman was. And that's even if the story is exactly what you said, 100% consensual, all of that. Here's why. One, there's the moral ethical thing. But two, let's remember all of these contracts have clauses that are built for stuff like this. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly what every word of Mel Tucker's contract says. But what I do know is these contracts are written where it's basically like, if you do anything to embarrass yourself or the university, we can fire you for cause. And it's very vague. It's not just committing a crime. It's not just whatever. It is stuff like this. The school is trying to protect its investment, and that is why it's so dumb for Mel Tucker. I'm sorry. You want to have a consensual relationship with a woman, that's fine. But one, you shouldn't be doing it outside of your marriage because, again, what kind of example does that set for the 85 guys in your locker room? But two, you can't be doing it with a university vendor because, again, it is going to trigger the clause that gets you fired for cause. And so in that regard, I don't think Mel Tucker's getting his money because this contract is written in such a way that if you do something dumb, it's pretty vague on what we can fire you for without paying you. Is that fair? I don't know. It doesn't change the fact that Mel Tucker should not have done this. So you can release all the statements. You can say whatever you want. But if you simply had not cheated on your wife, consensual or not, whether you're broken up with her or not, and if you certainly hadn't done it with a university vendor, a woman that you just admitted in your statement to ESPN you brought to campus, you would still have a job. You could lose 100-0 every game, 12 games a year for the next 8 years. And they would still owe you every single penny of your contract. But instead, you did something dumb. I'm sorry. This is an all-time bag drop because I don't think he's getting paid and I don't feel sympathy for him. If you want to have, let's be honest, let's just call a space. You want to have a sexual relationship with somebody that's not your wife, that's not my business. But get a divorce so it's on the record. And then, oh, by the way, certainly don't do it with a woman that you brought to campus for this sole reason. That is a vendor that is paid by the university. You can say it's consensual. She was still paid by the university for a service. And I'm not sitting here and saying that if Mel Tucker's version of events is 100% true, that she doesn't bear responsibility either. At the same time, this is on you. This is a sports podcast, and you are about to lose $90 million because you couldn't keep you know what, you know where. Lastly, let me say this, because I think this part's important. I see a lot of people, the point that I just brought up, well, they owed him 80 plus million, 75 million, something like that going forward. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, I mean, it's so obvious that he has been fired so they don't have to pay that contract. I actually disagree. I actually think it's the exact opposite. And I think all we got to do is use a little tiny bit of critical thinking to understand why. Remember, this investigation, even according to Mel Tucker, she reported him in like December, and the investigation got underway in March. There were multiple Freedom of Information requests put into the university by outlets, including ESPN. They were declined by Michigan State. So in other words, Michigan State was doing everything they could to keep this investigation under wraps. And so if anything, don't tell me they're trying to fire you for cause so they don't have to pay you. It's actually the exact opposite. They tried to do everything they could to keep this under wraps for as long as they could. And from my perspective, it sure feels like they were hoping that this was either going to get settled out of court. Mel Tucker was going to, let's be honest, pay this woman off, or it would all go away. And if anything, I keep seeing Mel Tucker complaining about not getting his money. It's actually the exact opposite. Michigan State probably should have made this public in March. And if anything, you're lucky that for the last 6 months, you got that direct deposit every 2 weeks. Just for fun, I went ahead and looked it up. Mel Tucker makes about $9.5 million a year over the totality of his contract. So let's use that as a baseline number. That is $790,000 a month in salary. $790,000 a month. Okay. Over the last 6 months, because this investigation started in March to April, April to May, May to June, June, July, July to August, August to September. That's 6 months. That is almost $5 million in salary that he got since this investigation started. So don't tell me they're trying to screw you out of money. If anything, they just gave you $5 million that they probably shouldn't have given you. So I'm sorry. I don't feel bad for Mel Tucker. I don't think he's going to get his money. And again, to be clear, he has every right to try to get the money. He has every right to fight in court. He has nothing to lose, but I don't think he's getting it because these contracts are written in a certain way. There is no, the contracts are so particular about keeping the idea of like what contract detrimental to the university is. It falls under a lot of different categories. Mel Tucker knew this. Mel Tucker knew that this relationship could trigger this cause if it didn't work out. If he doesn't, listen, it's not my money. So to be clear, I don't really care. I just don't think he's getting it because I think he has no one to blame but himself. Very quickly, before we get out of here today, I do want to switch gears, and I do want to talk about potentially who could be the next head coach at Michigan State, because we kind of danced around it last week. Mel Tucker is officially out, and so with Mel Tucker now gone, the question becomes, who will be the next head coach at Michigan State? Now, what I think is important to note is a few things here. One, Mel Tucker was making $9.5 million a year. As of right now, Michigan State does not plan and intend to pay that money to Mel Tucker, which means that $9.5 million a year just became available to go get the best head coach. And so I kind of called around on this over the last week, knowing this was coming. My understanding is the guys who fronted this money, Matt Ishbia, who is now the owner of the Phoenix Suns, Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're willing to pay big money again to get the right guy. And so there was some thought of, are they going to put up that money again? Michigan State doesn't care. Michigan State is a Big Ten school that makes money hand over fist with donors that have billions of dollars with a B, and those donors want to win. Even Matt Ishbia, who paid billions with a B for the Suns, will chip in if it's going to help Michigan State. So I want to talk about a few candidates, but I want to keep in mind, there are probably some guys that we're not even thinking about that realize they could get a $10 million payday that would probably be very interested in this job. So keep that in mind kind of going forward. But a couple names that have come up. First of all, let's just get the elephant out of the room. Anytime a job opens up, Deion Sanders' name is going to pop up. I don't believe Deion Sanders is a candidate for this job. I actually don't think he's going to be a candidate for any job at any time this cycle. Let me explain why. First of all, be clear. I don't think Deion Sanders is going anywhere. I hear, he's got to go to the SEC. He's got to go to the Big Ten. Why? Colorado's going to the Big 12. They're going to make $36, $37 million a year. And as he's proving, he can recruit anywhere, and he is the center of his own universe, okay? He doesn't need the SEC. He doesn't need the Big Ten. He can get players, he can get fans, he can get celebrities, he can do whatever he wants. So I don't believe he's going to be interested in any job specifically this year. Now, maybe in a year or two, whatever. But beyond that, a couple things. One, he makes $6 million. So he makes $6 million. I don't think he's motivated by money, but here's the important part. He has a lot of kids on that roster who followed him from Jackson State to play for him at Colorado. We know the NCAA is cracking down on transfers, and so I don't think he's leaving because he's not going to be able to take Travis Hunter to the next place or Shedeur Sanders to the next place if Shedeur comes back, which was kind of a topic on Wednesday. So I just bring it up because we're going to hear Deion, and I've seen multiple Michigan State fans, whatever it takes, any amount of money, whatever. I don't think there is any amount of money that could get him to leave Colorado after this year because, again, it would mean leaving Travis Hunter behind. It would mean leaving a bunch of other guys that transfer to play for him behind, and that would include his son if his son decides to come back to college for another year. Now, in terms of realistic candidates, I'm going to give a couple names that have popped out. The first one is one that I mentioned last week. It is not a name that I think is going to excite Michigan State fans, but I have been told that behind the scenes, Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi is very much trying very hard to get his name into the mix as the head coach of Michigan State. Remember, he was the defensive coordinator under Mark D'Antonio for many, many, many years. He was the defensive coordinator during Michigan State's glory run under Mark D'Antonio. The years they beat Ohio State, they went to the college football playoff. He was part of most of those teams before going to Pitt. It is worth noting, and you don't really think about this, Pitt has actually been pretty good over the last couple years. They won 11 games 2 years ago with Kenny Pickett. They won 9 games last season. Not doing so well this year. But the bottom line is he has won at a place that I don't think is very easy to win at. I'd also say this. Remember, when Mel Tucker got put on leave last week, he's now been fired. Mark D'Antonio was brought in as kind of a consultant for the Michigan State football program. I bring it up because Mark D'Antonio's in the building right now. Mark D'Antonio kind of got forced out. It was ugly in the manner in which he left. Remember, he literally retired the day after National Signing Day to try and screw over Michigan State. But you don't think now that he's back in the building, he's not going to push hard for his guy? He's not going to push hard for stability. He's not going to push hard for a guy that he knows isn't going to do something dumb like Mel Tucker. Now, he might not be as good of a coach as Mel Tucker. I don't know if he'll ever win 10 games or 11 games like Mel Tucker did. But I think he probably feels pretty confident that he's not going to do something dumb behind the scenes like this. So Pat Narduzzi is one name. A couple other names I've heard and thought of over the last couple of days. One is Mike Elko, the head coach at Duke. And for people, first of all, who would sit there and say, why would the Duke coach go to Michigan State? That's a weird geographical thing. Mike Elko is kind of a unicorn or a chameleon of college football. He's from Jersey. Kind of really started as a coach, in that northeast corner of the country. But then from there, went to Notre Dame, had great success as Notre Dame's coordinator, defensive coordinator, then goes to Texas A&M, and then, of course, went to Duke as the head coach a year ago. And so geography to me doesn't really feel like it'd be much of an issue, right? Geography to me, he's from the Northeast, coached in the Midwest at Notre Dame, coached in the southeast part or the southern part of the country at Texas A&M, now in the mid-Atlantic at Duke. So geographically, there's no reason that he can't bounce from place to place to place and have success. And also at Duke, he's had a ton of success. 9 wins a year ago. They're 3-0 this year, going into a very, very tough matchup at UConn. Knew I had to get my Huskies into the mix here. But I just bring it up because I hate to say it, they're going to be 4-0 after this week. They have the win over Clemson. And Mike Elko is going to be the hottest name in coaching. Now, what I think will be interesting about Mike Elko, I'm not sold. Do you take Michigan State just for the sake of taking Michigan State? Now, if they offer you 10, 11 million a year, makes it a little bit different. But at the same time, I do think it's worth noting. Mike Elko is going to be the top candidate at a lot of different places this coming cycle. Think about this as a scenario. Texas A&M essentially has not been the same since he left as defensive coordinator. If it really goes sideways with Jimbo Fisher, if they lose to Auburn this week and all of a sudden we look up and it's mid-November and they're playing LSU on the final week of the season and they're, 5-6 again trying to get bowl eligible, you don't think Mike Elko would make sense at Texas A&M? You don't think Mike Elko would make sense at some other places that might open up that are much bigger jobs than Michigan State? So that's my only concern with Mike Elko. He might be overqualified for that job. Another really interesting name, Jonathan Smith, the head coach at Oregon State. This one to me is interesting for a few reasons. One, first of all, a really good coach. Remember, Oregon State won 10 games last year. And if you look at that program, it has incrementally essentially gotten better every single year that he's been there, outside of the 1 year during COVID, where it was a weird year, especially in the Pac-12. Where it gets interesting is this. I see a lot of people say, would he really leave that job? He's an Oregon State alum. When he got the job, he literally cried at the press conference. But things have changed, and things do change. And Oregon State is not the job that it was even 3-4 years ago when he took the job. Right now, Oregon State is in the top 20 nationally, and they don't know where they're playing next year. They don't know what conference. They don't know where they're going. They don't know who their opponents are. And so if you're Jonathan Smith, do you try to hold it together at Oregon State, or do you strike while the iron's hot and try to get out? Now, again, maybe he's not interested. Maybe there's another job. But I do think at some point he is going to have to really consider leaving that job because it's just going to become that much tougher. Probably going to the Mountain West. It's not going to be the Pac-12. It's not going to be the same money. You can't compete with all the big West Coast schools that are now in the Big Ten getting all that TV money. Can't compete with Oregon, can't compete with Washington financially. So it's something to think about. I don't know if he'd be interested, but I think at some point he's going to have a very hard conversation with himself and his family, because I do think Oregon State is going to be very tough to win going forward. A couple other names. One, don't laugh when I say it, I think Bill O'Brien could be a candidate there. I think Bill O'Brien is certainly going to try to get his name into the running there. And it was interesting because I had somebody reach out to me today and say, would Bill O'Brien really want that job? I think he left Alabama to get out of college football. I don't think he left Alabama to get out of college football. I think he left Alabama to get away from Nick Saban. Listen, I like Nick Saban. I respect him. he's very hard to work for. And he's very hard to work for, by the way, if you are older and you have made your money. If you're Tommy Reese and you've been making $800K a year for 3-4 years, that's a lot different than Bill O'Brien that's probably got $40 million in the bank from coaching in the NFL as a head coach. And so you look at Nick Saban's track record with older coaches. They're either guys that need a job or they don't stay very long. Remember, Steve Sarkisian, before he came back as the offensive coordinator, he left because he didn't want to work for Nick Saban. Dan Enos was a play caller who left under very weird circumstances in the 11th hour. He just couldn't take working for Nick Saban anymore. Brian Daboll. People forget Brian Daboll was Alabama's offensive coordinator for one season and he bounced. And so Bill O'Brien, I think he just wants to be a head coach again. And if you remember, after the first year that he was the head coach, he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. His name was linked to pretty much every job that opened. I remember LSU. I remember Florida. I don't remember all the jobs that opened up that year, but that was the big year where it was USC, LSU, Florida, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, all opened up at the same time. And you saw Bill O'Brien's name as a candidate in all those jobs. But that said to me, his agent was working overdrive to try and get him opportunities. It did not happen. He's now back in the NFL. I think if the college ranks came and the money was good enough, he would take the job. A couple coordinator types beyond Bill O'Brien. I do think Sean Lewis, the Colorado offensive coordinator, is a guy that is a legitimate candidate. This is a guy, they are having a ton of success. And really, I think what stands out to me, I'm not an X's and O's scheme guy, but he's done a great job of being able to find creative ways to get that offense going without a great offensive line. Coaching them up, scheme is smart, getting the ball out of Shedeur Sanders' hands, getting the ball to playmakers. I give him a lot of credit. And remember, he was a head coach previously at Kent State before going to Colorado as the offensive coordinator. Basically said, I'd rather go work for Coach Prime than I would stay as a head coach in the MAC where things are going to be really tough. And the other one I've heard too, I've heard Jim Leonard, former Wisconsin defensive coordinator. As best I can tell, he's out of college football this year, but respected. Coach, played in the NFL forever, was Wisconsin's defensive coordinator, was Wisconsin's interim head coach last year. They went 4-3. And he is a guy that I believe that Michigan State is very interested in. All right. I think that is it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. What a show. What a freaking midweek show. That one was we're talking, that was some A++ material there. So if you're not subscribed, do your boy a favor, make sure to do so. Because it's probably on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Make sure to rate and review the show. If you could go on Apple, give me a quick 5 stars, leave a review. That really would help. Make sure you're following on social media. By the way, big news in the Torres social media front. And when I say I mean my producer. Yes, I have hired a full-time producer. Shout out producer Matt. We have started an Aaron Torres Pod TikTok page. So if you're like Gen Z or whatever, and TikTok is where you get your news, do me a favor, follow me on TikTok, Aaron Torres Pod. Aaron Torres Pod also on Instagram. Make sure you're following on YouTube, and that's it. Reminder, we'll do the bonus episode on Thursday, the full week 4 preview. We'll preview Notre Dame, Ohio State. We'll preview Oregon, Colorado. We'll preview Alabama, Ole Miss. We'll preview Clemson, Florida State. That'll be on Thursday, normal Friday show. And I think that's it. Shout out to Tor and Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back on tomorrow. Full preview, week 4, loaded segment, loaded weekend. I'll be back Thursday, Aaron Torres.